The looting of government properties has become one of the main precursors for the depletion of critical infrastructure in Nigeria, from the destruction of oil pipelines in the Niger Delta creeks, leading to losses of billions of naira, to the punch-on of outgoing governments to cut away with government properties. Nigeria is battling a deep human problem. Individuals have grown a threat to loot commonly seen government infrastructure, including railway metals, iron rods used in bridges, and now lights used on the airport runways. There is a constant risk of the losses of the resources to improve the delivery of governance and government services. There is also the undying issue of bad eggs of the police force who check the phones of innocent citizens and loots them of their hard-earned money. From the government officials to the street thief who steals electricity cables, Nigeria has a looting issue to fix. Now, joining me tonight for this discussion, I have Segun, a public affairs analyst, who joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. Warm welcome to you, Segun, and thanks for joining us in Politics HQ.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Now, Segun, when examining the recurrent incidents of looting and stripping of government assets by outgoing officials, what do you think are the underlying factors that contribute to such a behavior, and why does it persist over time?
Okay, so basically, underlying factor, I think we have to recognize that Nigeria runs a culture of impunity. And that impunity starts right at the top and trickles down and permeates through the entirety of society. So you have presidents who refuse to obey court orders and nothing happens. So that's impunity. You have state governors who refuse to obey court orders, who do take actions that might be considered even outrightly illegal. And in the case of this conversation, who simply take assets that belong to government, and there are no consequences. You have police, military officials, uniformed people who break traffic laws, without any misgivings whatsoever, and nothing happens. So it's a problem that permeates right from the top of the society to the very bottom. So it's therefore not surprising, since we live in a society where anybody and everybody gets away with bad behavior, it's therefore not surprising that people behave badly in this particular instance, and they get away with it. That's exactly why it will continue to happen. For as long as our governors continue to, it's not new, like you said, so for as long as they continue to do this and there are no consequences, they will continue to do it.
Zero consequences, no accountability. I guess that's why, that's what fosters this behavior. Now, Segun, the indiscriminate nature of the looting, where even basic items like furniture, electronics, kitchen utensils, is quite astonishing, to say the least. What do you think motivates officials to engage in such a rampant stripping of government properties? Are there any political or personal incentives at play? I do understand and acknowledge that you did mention that, the culture of impunity is a contributory factor to this. What other reasons could they be doing this?
Well, I also think that people go into public office in Nigeria predominantly and in most cases not to serve. And this can be seen in the actions of our public officials across all levels, whether at the federal level, whether at the state level or the local government level, whether you're talking about the arms of government, whether you're talking about the executive or the legislature, and even the judiciary. What you find in most cases is that when somebody gets into public office, there's celebration, there's rejoicing, even amongst members of society, even amongst citizens who these people are supposed to be going to serve. There's jubilation. And when you dig deep into the root cause, the reason people are jubilant, you find that it's largely because they recognize that this is their turn. So the guy himself...
Their turn to eat or to serve.
Absolutely. Their turn to eat, not to serve. So the guy himself who's just gotten appointed or elected is jubilant, is rejoicing. His family, immediate family, will be jubilant and rejoicing. His friends will jubilate because they all know that one way or the other, they now have access to the national cake. They now have access, to the treasury. So it's therefore not surprising when they are leaving office. Now, let's not forget that this looting is not perpetrated by the governors alone, if at all. The looting that the governors do would usually revolve around things like vehicles and money from the treasury, like just outright embezzlement. But a lot of the stripping that we see, I'm sure you must have seen the video from Osun State, for example.
Oh yes.
And how severe, like you say, how severe that stripping was. They stripped right down to electrical fittings on the walls of the government house. Light fixtures.
I did happen to, I was in the government house in Oshogbo a few months ago, and I went there to interview the governor, and I could see that it was almost like they were starting again.
A new building.
Yes.
It was a new project, and it's shocking. Now that was perpetrated not by the governor, but by the people around him. But the reason they would do that, and the reason they had the audacity, the reason they were not worried about consequences was because they knew, one, that the governor either approved or would look away, and that two, the governor himself had his hands soiled, as we're seeing in the other states. So you move away from Osun State and go to Zamfara State, or you go to Benue State, for example, where the new governor has gone to raid Governor Otom's vehicle workshop to recover 29 vehicles. My goodness, 29 vehicles taken away by the previous governor. These vehicles belong to the people of Benue State, but this man went away with them. Now, as these assets are being recovered from the governor, what will happen to him? Now, your guess is as good as mine, and we all know that the answer to that is a big fat nothing will happen.
So now, I want to take you up on the example of Benue State, because it's quite shocking what happened there. The Benue State government had to go into the hold of his car repairing company to recover some of those vehicles. But the People's Democratic Party in Benue State have criticized Governor Hyacinth Alia's actions, alleging witch hunting of his predecessor, Samuel Ortom, over the removal of vehicles from Ortom's automobile workshop. Segun, what do you make of this? Is there an element of witch hunting to it, and is that the proper way to go about it? Because they even allege that, private citizens and innocent people's vehicles were in that workshop and they were also towed away.
I'm absolutely certain that if anybody suffered some sort of collateral damage as a result of that action by the new governor, that person will be sorted out and the matter will be resolved. I mean, if your vehicle was there and you have evidence that vehicle belongs to you, it doesn't belong to you, the vehicle will have vehicle papers, for God's sake. There'll be a license and your name will be there. So you go and reclaim your vehicle and there won't be any problem to that. Look, for me, you can't play politics with this. So the PDP can say anything they want to say. I think the onus is now on Governor or former Governor Ortom to prove his innocence. But I cannot, for the life of me, say that anything was wrong with what this governor has just done. Even if you claim that it's witch hunting, it's okay. If you are not a witch, nobody will hunt you. So prove that you are not a witch.
Now, transition periods, particularly when new leaders are about to assume office, seem to be particularly vulnerable to this acts of looting. That's when they get to work. Some of them feel it's a reward for service, and government is for everyone. They feel when they take from government, there's no sense of accountability. They feel, oh, the money belongs to all of us. Now, Segun, in your opinion, what measures can be taken to enhance the security and protection of government assets during this critical period, regardless of who the office holder is. I mean, these are state institutions that remain there regardless of the occupier of the office. Are there any successful examples from other countries that perhaps Nigeria can learn from?
Excuse me, I think it's an institution matter. It's institutionalization of the safeguards that will protect public assets from public officials. What the specifics of that will mean is something we need to sit down and brainstorm over. You know, it's important to also note that we're hearing all of these noises from these three states only because there is a transition from one political party to another. You know, it's not to say that in those states where there's a new governor, but of the same party, that looting hasn't happened by the outgoing governor. So it's just that this time, you know, they're adversaries, so they're using this as ammunition to fight against, you know, their opposition. So now, in terms of what needs to be done, I think that first we may need to find a way to enact some sort of legislation that deals with this specifically. I know that we already have a lot of laws, but look, we're in a peculiar situation in Nigeria, and peculiar, you know, desperate times, desperate measures. So I would suggest that the National Assembly and the various state assemblies should come up with legislation that compels some sort of stock take and inventory, almost like a code of conduct, tribunal, declaration of asset type of thing. Where
as part of the handover process.
Yes, as a part of the handover process, there has to be an inventory of items that you took in, and the items you are now handing over. You know, and that inventory must include, if you like, a running account of what happened to those assets in the duration of your term in office. So if it's a 4-year term or an 8-year term, what did you start with? What went in and what went out during your tenure? What do you have left when you are leaving? And then somebody needs to go in there and do a stock take that will show that those items in that statement are physically on ground. And technology can also be deployed to do this. The challenge, however, is that, yes, this might sound all nice and pretty, but who's going to implement it? So I think we're going to have a problem with that, because the people that should implement this are the beneficiaries of this brazen and wanton actions of illegality. So, but, you know, the answer to your question is there's a lot of measures that can be taken, and all of this needs to be institutionalized, maybe by virtue of legislation.
Segun, when people take things from government, they often feel, you know, it's a victimless crime. Who is government? Government is faceless. Now, the stripping of valuable assets from government residences by outgoing occupants raises concerns about governance and public trust in Nigeria. How does this practice impact the overall governance structure? And what are the potential consequences beyond the immediate loss of assets? And also those assets, they need to be replaced.
Well, I mean, so the first and obvious consequence of this is that the people bear an unnecessary additional cost of governance. So, because those things, like you just said, must be replaced. And in most instances, you find that this thing might run into tens, maybe hundreds of millions of naira. If you're talking of vehicles, for example, you know, what's the value of 29 vehicles? That's 30 vehicles. Even if you say they're just small sedans, and the government is going to buy new ones, it's about 20 million naira to buy a Toyota Corolla today. So if you're buying just 20, and I'm sure they're not just Corollas, but if you're buying 30 Toyota Corollas today at 20 million naira each, simple mathematics, that's 400 million naira gone, you know, from the state coffers. So that's one immediate consequence. I think the other thing to be said is that this in itself is only symptomatic of a much bigger problem. And, you know, and that I think is what perhaps Nigerians need to focus on. And it's the fact that good governance suffers when the people that are supposed to deliver governance are only there to feather their own nests. And that's what we're seeing in these instances of looting. These guys obviously and apparently are not there to serve you and I. They're there to take what they can from the treasury. And that will then, you know, trickle down across the entire gamut of the governance framework, to impoverish the people further. So for me, the looting in itself is terrible. There's a cost implication to that, but there's a far deeper problem that this is pointing at, and I think that's what perhaps the conversation needs to shift towards.
Now, Segun, the monetization policy introduced during President Olusegun Obasanjo's administration aimed to instill financial discipline in the public sector and reduce unnecessary spending. Despite this policy, this looting of government assets continues. What do you believe are some of the key loopholes or shortcomings in the policy's implementation that allows these practices to persist? You did talk about, legislation again. Do we need more legislation to prevent this?
Yeah, I think legislation would definitely help. I don't think there's anything like too much legislation. If there's any little loophole that existing laws are not dealing with, then by all means, put up a new law that fixes that loophole, or amend existing laws that address that issue, but perhaps that has left some loopholes for people to take advantage of. With the monetization issue, I was never in support of that because I saw it as, yes, perhaps a measure to prevent government from losing too much money when these types of things happen, when looting occurs and all that. But I think a far better solution would have been to secure those assets, to secure government property. For example, if you monetize the money that you give the average government official for rent as a result of monetization, as a result of the monetization policy, how many years rent would you have given how many public officials over a 16-year period, for example, two-term periods for, let's say, two different governments, versus taking money to build quarters that those government officials can stay in. The quarters stay there, it belongs to the government, and new officials can come in while the old ones vacate. That saves money for government, and it builds up an asset base, for the people of the country. So that monetization process, I thought, kind of moved us a bit backward in the direction, away from the direction that we should have been headed towards. And as we have seen, I'm not very sure that we can say that it was a successful policy, because here we are today, the looting continues. Here we are today. How many states adopted that policy, for example, from the federal government? So I don't think that policy addressed the problem from a fundamental point of view. I think it was perhaps, in fact, some people would say that was in itself was a way of creating avenues for loot, for sharing of the national cake as well.
Now, Segun, you did talk about the role of technology earlier when you were giving your submission. Establishing a comprehensive asset management system could be a potential solution to prevent the looting of government assets. In your opinion, what would be the key components and features of such a system, and how can technology and digital solutions play a role in improving asset tracking and preventing theft? Because we often cry after the crime has been done. How do we prevent it?
Yeah, prevention is better than cure. And invariably, prevention is also cheaper than cure. Talking about the technology, fortunately, I'm opportuned, I don't know what to call it, lucky, in the sense that this actually falls within the gamut of exactly what I do for a living. And I can tell you for free that tagging and tracking both movable and fixed assets of government with different types of technology is nothing. It's very easy to achieve. Setting up an electronic register of those assets as a further on of the tracking is also very easy to achieve. You have a database. Now, you can even go further and deploy blockchain technology, to keep those registers, to ensure that they cannot be tampered with, and whatever goes in there is what will always be there. All of this can be done. So you can use something they call the RFID technology, radio frequency identification, where you have tags that are tamper-proof and unremovable, that you attach to movable assets. You can put antennas or readers at doorways and entrances of the government facilities, such that if any of those assets leave without appropriate approvals, an alarm is triggered wherever. You can put the alarms at EFCC, or you can put the alarms at, maybe the Auditor General's office, or whatever the system that you.
So you're not totally reinventing the wheel. These are practical steps that can be taken.
There are things that are done. Yeah, absolutely. These are technologies that are time tested. There are things that even private sector people
are available.
Using, and are easily available and are not particularly expensive. So for example, let me give you an example. The cost of a tag, a simple tamper-proof paper sticker tag, could be as low as 300 Naira, Gbenga, depending on the type of tag and depending on the type of asset you are tagging. Some are more expensive, 300 Naira. So if you have 10,000 assets to tag, do 300 times 10, and that tag is there for life. So these things are not particularly expensive. The technology is not rocket science. It's out there. But where is the political will to deploy technology to prevent, looting and all of that? I think that's the real challenge that faces.
Now, finally, Segun, before I let you go, moving forward, what steps can be taken to ensure smooth transition of power without the loss of valuable government assets? Because it's a recurring theme in our democratic experience. Are there innovative approaches? You did talk about digital, asset management, such as asset inventories or digital platforms that can be implemented to track, safeguard government properties more effectively. And what can be done to also change that cultural mindset, that deep-rooted mindset that, government belongs to everyone, it's our turn to eat, government is faceless, government's property is my property, basically.
Exactly. So what you've said now, takes us back to what I said earlier about this being simply a symptom of a far deeper problem. And you know what that problem is? It's the fact that our leadership selection or recruitment process is deeply flawed. The people that get into public office in Nigeria today, with all due respect and apologies to whoever might be offended and whoever might fall out of this generalization, the people that get into public office are typically the worst of us. They're typically people that don't do anything. They're typically people that have risen through the ranks in a corrupt political system, and therefore when they get into office, the only language they know is for them to go there and reward themselves and the people that put them there. So to fix this problem, we need to fix the larger problem. You know what has happened with the last election and how that is being contested and how some of the incredible things that we saw play out, a glitch happening on the same day that elections, 3 ballot papers were thrown into a ballot box. At the same time, there was a glitch for the electronic transmission of one of those elections. There was no glitch for electronic transmission of the other 2 at the same polling unit at the same time. Clearly, from a logical point of view, you know that this is impossible. And here we are. It's been foisted on the country as a fact and a reality that people are now trying to prove to have happened or not happened in a court of law. We need to fix this problem so that whoever gets into office would have been selected in a manner that ensures that it is people that intend to serve, people that are genuinely desirous of making positive contributions and leading the country on a path of progress that will get into office. Until we do that, this looting during transition is a small problem. What about the billions of Naira that governors tend to make away with? We have Governor Aborowa. I'm not slandering anybody because he was convicted, for stealing billions and billions of the money of the people of Delta State and filtering all of that away into the UK, and it took the UK to convict and jail him. So until we fix our leadership selection process, I'm afraid, this looting of government property is just a small part of the consequences.
Thank you very much, Segun Sopitan, for your insight and analysis. Always a pleasure talking to you on Politics HQ. Thank you.
Thanks you, and have a great evening.